Thank you everybody for coming out today and joining our Founders Roundtable series, Austin edition. Why don't we just kind of go around the table real quick, introduce yourselves, what are you guys working on, ultimately where you are in terms of the stage of the company, and we'll go from there.
All right.
We'll start over here with Nick.
Happy to. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see and meet you. My name is Nick Spiller. I'm an investor over at Capital Factory, where I've been involved for quite some time now, and our job is to help every startup in Texas, one way or another, across the state. And specifically, I am responsible for our investor network, and so we have about 1,000 VCs and angels, Mucker Capital being one of them, who have signed up to receive deal flow from Capital Factory, and we curate our companies down when they're raising money and help connect them with investors. And I'm also responsible for our deal flow, so recruiting new companies into the ecosystem as well. Happy to be here.
All right, cool. Hey folks, my name is Nathan Latka. The company that I'm building is called Founderpath. If you're doing $1 million in ARR, we'll lend you $500K by buying your accounts receivables. Or if you're doing $10 million revenue, we'll go up to $5 million. So generally up to 50% of your ARR. The reason I'm building this, the reason I got into it, is because back in 2011, 2012 in college, I launched a software company called Heyo.com. I ultimately got really excited when Techstars reached out and said, we'd love to put in $2 million at 8.5 pre. And I said, oh my gosh, I feel like king of the world, of course, sign me up. And then I quickly learned what a 1x liquidation preference was, what a ratchet cost was, and what dilution looked like. I got diluted down to 30% equity, and we only had $1 million worth of run rate. We had a $6 million acquisition offer come in, which the board rejected. I would have loved to take at 20 years old for obvious reasons. And I said, why does anyone give up this much optionality this early? Let me invent a debt product for software companies. So we are not necessarily alone. We are, again, buying accounts receivable today. We've raised $160 million worth of capital, 10 million of which is equity. The other $100 million is debt. That is the fund that we use on balance sheet to buy capital, to buy receivables from founders. Today, we put out $120 million worth of capital to about 250 bootstrapped B2B SaaS founders with a team of 13. So that's where we're at today.
Amazing.
Great. Hey, my name is Eric Johnson. I'm the founder of Membersy. Membersy is a subscription management and billing platform for retail healthcare providers. I started the company back in 2015 with $20,000 and an idea really to disrupt antiquated dental insurance. So I saw at the time that private equity was starting to roll up dental practices, which was traditionally a cottage industry, and creating what you call dental service organizations, or DSOs. And I learned that these DSOs and these dentists and hygienists and all the stakeholders on the DSO side hated dental insurance for various reasons, right? Reimbursement rates, claims process, right? Everything that folks don't like dental insurance for. Likewise, on the flip side, I noticed that patients didn't like dental insurance, and that roughly 40% of Americans didn't have insurance. And this created complexities and issues with going to the dentist. So I created a platform that enabled dental service organizations to launch and manage their own proprietary in-house dental plan, and built it from the ground up. In 2020, I raised $20 million in venture debt to acquire my old company out in California. And then in the fall of 2021, I raised $66 million in equity on a minority growth deal from Spectrum Equity up in Boston. So it's been a great story. I was CEO for 7 years and stepped down last April. It was just my time to move on, but company's today got 65 employees and does roughly 35 million in ARR. So it's been a nice growth story, and we're still growing. So it's nice to be here. I appreciate everyone's time.
Of course.
Hi, everyone. My name is Roei Yellin. I come from Israel, and I'm the co-founder of 8Fig. I'm the CRO. 8Fig help online sellers, people who sell on Amazon and Shopify, with their working capital problem. They need to buy inventory, they have to pay for freight, they have to pay for logistics, they have to pay for marketing. And because they are first digital native brands, they are pretty much unbankable. The access to banking services is very minimal, except the checking account. They don't have much more than that, but they do grow very, very fast. And so they need more and more working capital. And that's a very underserved market, and we try to help them with this problem. We build a software and a platform where they can onboard and map out how the cash flow for the next 6, 9, 12 months will look like, and by optimizing their cash flow for them, because they don't have the resources to have a team that will do that for them, we help them do that automatically. And we help them overcome the working capital problem.
How long ago did you guys start the company?
Yeah, so we started the company 3.5 years ago. 2 months ago, we announced our B round. It was $140 million. 100 of it was as a debt facility as well, and $40 million in equity led by KDT. And that's basically it.
I'm Justin Papermaster, founder at LoudCrowd. Started with my co-founder Gary in 2019, and LoudCrowd is a platform that helps consumer brands turn really both their customers and influencers into actual social advocates for the brand. So we create really highly scalable ambassador type programs that get these people posting, sharing they love the brand on Instagram and TikTok, but with the ultimate goal that they're going to drive site traffic to actually a native brand-owned ambassador storefront that lives on the website, where each person can curate their favorite products from the brand, their social content flows through, and it's a really socially integrated shopping experience.
Very cool.
We've raised $9 million, Series A. Yeah.
Very cool. I got a lot of great questions here. Number one, you guys are all here in Austin. Why Austin?
110-degree heat, we love it.
Right? Is there any particular reasons you guys are here?
Taxes.
Taxes, yeah.
For me personally, I grew up in Dallas and was always finding myself coming to Austin on the weekends to have a good time. And I thought, why not create a business there? And really, I kind of knew it was the next thing for young professionals, and I thought it'd be a great place to open up shop and recruit good talent to come work for the business.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's changed at all since the pandemic, and obviously people now being remote? Obviously I think because I'm from LA and we saw this tech ecosystem really boom, and then it's all of a sudden now you can get talent from anywhere. I don't know if that's changed that dynamic at all.
Yeah, I think the pandemic for almost all companies is changed the way people work, obviously, right? I'm a little bit old school. I like people in the office. I like the camaraderie. I like the collaboration. But a lot of our folks are hybrid, right? So I think of our last 20 hires, I'd probably say half of them live in Austin and half of them don't. And you've got to plan accordingly, right? If you're growing here and looking at office space and looking to set up shop, right? You got to make sure that you're getting something that you can fill out. So it's definitely changed, but I think the old school fundamentals of collaboration are still key.
Yeah. Anybody else feel the same way?
I have a very different problem because we are split between Tel Aviv in Israel and over here. So when we were thinking about starting our own office in the US because our client's base is over here, we didn't want to go to the West Coast because of the time difference. It was too much with Israel, and we didn't want to go to New York because New York, it was the middle of the pandemic. New York was, again, Austin was a better place considering back then, and it's also we are catering to e-commerce sellers, and Austin is quite the hub for that. Yeah. So taking all things into consideration, that was the best decision. But being close to the other offices is also a consideration.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Interesting.
Yeah, I would add, we run a co-working business, and it's you're right. The way people work has changed, and it's kind of we need to add a new option for where your headquarters is, because even on an SEC filing, you have to declare it somewhere, right? There's no distributed option for your headquarters, when that seems to be almost the default option today. But I don't think, whether people are working in the office or out of the office is one question, but whether Austin, Texas is the next hub for tech and startups, I think is at least from my perspective, which is in the middle of it, is undisputed. And, every day, multiple times a day, I meet people from everywhere, whether it be Israel or New York, that have moved here. And for a bit, it was, the coast during the pandemic, but I think it's even more global than that now. And we've, through this, we've gotten on the list for when you're moving your company to the United States. Austin is on the short list to be considered, and it's winning. I feel like in a lot of situations, a lot like yours, and so I think we're working different, but I think because of that, it even plays more to Austin's strengths. As long as Austin's a little bit less affordable than all these other options, we're all right. In the day it becomes a little more affordable than LA, like people will probably start moving to LA, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have another question here, which is kind of centered around, how many of your guys' businesses like as a first-time founder, or have you guys been multiple founders before?
I'm a first-time founder, been in the startup ecosystem in Austin here for over 10 years at a lot of big companies that have had good exits, like Trendkite, for example, we were just talking about. And I think it's really interesting how the evolution of the tech scene in Austin has played out. And as there's always been a lot of great talent in Austin. And so I really think that as the ecosystem has grown around it, it's created a really incredible hub, which is what everyone's speaking to. Why be here? Well, it's got talent, it's got an incredible community of startups, and everyone wants to be here from a living standpoint as well.
It's like a good place to be a digital nomad from,
Yes.
right? And that was always kind of the sell for Austin, is like, it's a great place to be because it's in the middle of the country and you can go East Coast, West Coast, North, South, it's all similar. And I felt like that was a lot of the use case even before the pandemic of why people came here is like, because it was easy to be everywhere from Austin. And I think it's even more so that today.
I think a big factor, I don't know if it's a big factor, but the fact that like Austin is ground zero for all the podcasters of the world that cater to those kind of digital nomads, Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, Peter Attia, Lex Friedman, all those guys are working here. It's a very big sticker to attract talent. People know about it, right? They know less about Nashville because of that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Now, for me personally, I was first-time founder when I started Membersy. I think I was 27 years old, and I bring my age up because now that I'm 36 and I got 3 little kids, I don't know if I could have started it now. I always tell folks that always ask me, how did you do it, right?
Yeah.
For me particularly, I went dead broke, or I was broke when I started the business, and it was a forcing mechanism for me to succeed, right? When you've got your back against the wall and you've got the mindset of success, you have no choice, you're gonna succeed, right? So I don't think I could force myself to go into that position today because of the requirements I have financially with having a wife and kids and family and the things that they need to do. So for me, I started it, before all of that, it doesn't mean I won't start another company, but I don't know if I would start another one from the kind of the pure ground floor where it was like 0 in revenue, 0 team members, and an idea. So anyone that's out there, interested in starting their business and kind of putting it off for the perfect time to do it, I think the perfect time is the earlier to do it, right?
Absolutely.
And also, when I would interview people as we grew Membersy and we were hiring folks, the people I always wanted to hire were people that they didn't have to be successful, but that attempted to start their own business. I didn't care what it was, but if you attempted and it didn't work out, that's not a failure, right? It shows, I think, in your career path that you're willing to take risks and willing to kind of go all in, and I think that's important.
So I'm a second-time founder, and I started my second company in the middle of the pandemic when the third girl was born. And to challenge what you said, I think, you have more commitments and you are more deep into it, right? But the fact that you are more experienced will shorten your time to revenues and to success, right? Because
Sure.
you know the playbook, right? It's and so I think that's also a consideration, because when you are a first-time founder, 20 years old, 27 years old, when I was 30 years old, I knew nothing. So
Yep.
and I had to figure it out. I guess in the second time I knew much more, and
Sure.
it was much easier to succeed.
That's a good point.
You've been a multiple-time founder, right?
I say I've been getting beat up since startups since I was 19 years old.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you got to get the cycles under you, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tons. I mean, the way I'm building Founderpath today is I want it to be a 100-year sort of company. I mean, we sit on so much data that founders give us. We can build so many products for them. It's sort of a long-term playbook. But I've learned, this first company grounded out for 6 years. My only regret on that was I wish I sold it way earlier.
Yeah.
I had this thing like, man, I would let the angels down. They put in, $2 million worth of capital. They're going to hate it. But every angel, even though I flash sold the company, it was doing 600K of revenue. It had declined from the million, doing 600K. Flash sold it for 0.5x ARR, so 300K. My ego took hit. We figured out a way to polish the press release so it looked better. Okay, so I had a little bit of my ego in place. But it was like, I wish I sold it 3 years earlier and took those learnings and launched the new thing clean slate. And everyone, all those angels wrote checks into the new deal. So, and they're doing just fine now. So,
Sure.
yeah.
I think that I think Eric, you hit on a great point that I think a lot of people, a lot of founders specifically don't think about, which is the idea of failing, right? And what we contextually think of failing as a society and in general. But obviously there's certain hubs like Silicon Valley, Bay Area, where such a different mind state, right? That's such a welcomed exercise, and they don't define it as a negative, they define it as a positive, where it's one other way to learn what not to do or how not to do something. But I'm curious as to you being a first-time founder and then the second-time founder and then multiple times, and what has been some of those times where it was failing or it felt like failing, but obviously in hindsight, it might have felt like a very difficult back against the wall experience, but was character defining or company defining, months, maybe years later. Any stories around those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I can go back to kind of some of the early
absolutely.
failures,
I think that's
right?
super important.
And I
right?
can even go back to some things that I thought were a failure when everyone else thought they were a success.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're very hard on yourself, right? You're your worst critic. So I would say early on for me, I didn't know technology. I didn't know how to create my own email address.
Me too.
Right? If you were to tell me, hey, go into Gmail and create your pop account, forward all, I'd have to call someone to figure that out, right? So, but then again, I was building a tech-enabled platform built on the Stripe API, and it's kind of bare bones, and so I thought what I needed to do was go hire kind of the expensive firms in Austin that could help me build this product, right? And I learned very quickly that those folks, a guy like me coming in is like fresh meat to them. A guy that doesn't understand.
Name names. Who took all your money? What's the consulting group? What's the name?
Middle name, billable hours.
Yeah, I know, right?
Consultants. What I ended up doing is I ended up getting on Upwork and finding an agency in Lahore, Pakistan, and the agency was terrible. But I would occasionally get this guy named Adnan Akram, who was just super sharp. Just very impressive. I talked to him, I was like, wow, you're awesome. Everyone else you're working with, I'm not very impressed, but leave your agency, become members, our full-time Membersy guy. I'm gonna pay you $1,500 a month, work 8 to 5 American hours, and then as we grow, you'll grow. I would go over there once a quarter to the Middle East. I would visit them, treated them like family. Long story short, I got to 10 full-time engineers in Pakistan that were with us for 7, 8 years through Upwork.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And as we grew, we naturally added engineers here and product leaders here and those things. But early on, that failure of kind of wasting money on technology consultants, right, firms to help us, led me to doing it quote unquote the cheap way, but doing it quote unquote the hands-on way, and really built that. And then even up till recently, when I stepped down as CEO about a year ago, after a successful exit, and it was just my time. I was doing it for over 7 years and wasn't ability to do it. I felt like for some reason I was failing because I was no longer CEO. But in reality, as I learned, was that I succeeded because I worked myself out of a job, right? And I realized that my identity isn't necessarily tied to me being the day-to-day CEO. My identity is tied to me starting a company that now, employs 60 people who have family members, and that's kind of what I, take away from it as my most proud achievement, is being able to create a platform that enabled folks to make a living and working for it. So
yeah, for sure. Anybody else have like some war stories from those types of experiences and backs against the wall? I mean, I remember, like, for me, my very first startup, because I was a non-technical founder, I was always that guy who had like ideas but never knew how to execute. And I think like as a non-technical founder, there is a moment when you get an epiphany of like, oh, with code you can build anything. Like you can automate anything that's manual or some repeatable process, right? And for me, I didn't figure that out until like my late 20s and realized that was possible. But to get my first startup off the ground, it was like working for $12 an hour, answering phones at a cancer clinic and doing that part-time just to like substantiate food and basic bills. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's also stuff that's like, when I do hire people or when we do look to add to the team, it's like, I always ask them what was their worst job, like to understand context, right? So if you're somebody who, like when we've been hiring engineers as of late, like especially with like the downturn and a lot of those types of jobs being laid off, we thought we could be able to cherry pick from people and get people at a relatively decent cost, but they're spoiled. Like we found out very quickly, like they're within 5-10 minutes they're already dictating their salary expectations and all that stuff. And in reality, you can go on an Upwork or be much more scrappy with how you find the productivity for a cost that's a better ROI.
I think the word used there, scrappy, is key.
Yeah.
You like being scrappy should never stop.
Yeah.
Like when you raise money or you get to certain levels and you read, okay, I've got to delegate more, right? Or I've got to get out of the way, right? Like I don't believe in that, right? I think you've got to stay scrappy, right? You got to do what you need to do to grow the business. And I'll add this, like I was always amazed in Austin, like all these founders that they would just constantly, people gauge their company's success based off of the money they raised, right? You have a founder that raised money and then you see like every year you see a press release, so-and-so raised Series A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, that person's got probably no equity.
Dilution.
Yeah. So I was like, the more you can put your back against the wall financially and not raise money, if you can just weather the storms, you'll come out all right. In my example, I raised $300,000, didn't raise $1 for over 5 years, and then had some offers, right? But then went the debt route, right? And so the more you can just bootstrap it. And then when you think you need more money or need money to take to the next level, keep bootstrapping.
Yeah.
Like the time to raise money will come, and it's usually never when you're looking for it.
Yeah.
Right. And you gotta have leverage, right? If you're out there looking, the VCs, they talk to each other. Like they know every company that's looking for money, right? And the more you can sit back and let them come to you, and then have multiple offers, that's it. That's the only way to really get favorable terms that you want.
I think that's one of the hardest things to do as a founder, though, to be so uncomfortable, so poor. Oftentimes, I mean, many times my co-founder and I, we didn't pay ourselves. I mean, we didn't pay ourselves for the first 9 months of starting the business. We raised a pre-seed round, started paying ourselves, and then immediately got a little bit ahead, said let's hire people, let's make our lives easier. COVID hits. We needed to raise more money because of all the expensive people that we hired, and so we went back to the uncomfortable position of cutting our salaries to zero again. And I think that's, people look and say, starting a company, it's hard, it's stressful, but I think you really have to realize the internal battle that you have to go through of, are you willing to make those sacrifices to get your sales, or you're going to be the one doing the cold calls. Because you hire someone, now you have to raise more money, or you have a shorter runway, or it's always a trade-off, and it's an internal struggle, really, especially in the early days.
Yeah.
I mean, what is hiring? I mean, hiring people feels good. It selfishly feels good.
I fucking hate it.
Like, it feels
I
good.
want to be the first person to take a company public with a one-person team,
Sure.
for $1 billion. That would be incredible.
Well, me too, but...
Well, I don't think we're that far away from it, right? Because there's a lot of folks that are using things like Upwork, and when you write, the key to using things like Upwork is it's really hard to use them if you don't write the good system to give the freelancer on Upwork to then run the system. And so a lot of people try to use these things and outsource without the system.
Yeah.
And so like what our whole team is, they have to be historians. They've got to be documenting and writing playbooks like a book every month. And then they literally publish books every month, which is a new system. That system then gets passed off to cheaper labor, and we pay our full-time people who are expensive for their creativity to figure out the system. We skip the middle person that we pay whatever. Most people would hire someone for $100,000 a year or whatever. We skip that step altogether and go right down to the $5 an hour freelancer from wherever we find them. But everyone else on the team, everyone's making more than $250, right? But that's the gap that works for us.
Yeah, which to that point, I mean, I think it's like you don't hire somebody to do sales like in the very beginning. You have to figure it out for yourself, build out the systems to then go hire somebody, even if it's not to that lower cost extent, but like to understand, I think, like basic fundamentals and metrics of what your expectations are to figure out that go-to-market and building out playbooks. I mean, I 1000% agree with that.
It's very obvious to an investor if you have to raise money, right? And like so many founders you
Speak
meet
to that point.
I'll just like offer the investor perspective. There's teams you meet where it's like, we've got to raise money, we're raising money, it's all they want to talk about, and it just doesn't work, right? And you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Whereas if you just keep building your business and you get more customers, you build a better product, that's what is going to make you more attractive to an investor. And the reality is, investors want to sit down and talk about building your business, right? And like we'll get to the funding piece of it, but it's the founders that come in. It's like, hey, like I noticed so-and-so at Holt Ventures. Like Holt Ventures actually could be a huge game changer for us. Like, can we strategize how to like make that introduction and like come into it with a more constructive like perspective? And I get sometimes you have to raise money. That's a whole different conversation. But the reality is investors don't want to invest in companies that are about to run out of money, right? Like they want to invest in companies that aren't going to run out of money. Like imagine that. And so like ultimately it's like if you are like, like just all in on fundraising, like in a lot of cases, especially if you don't already have an investor, it's different once you have an institutional investor and you've kind of broken into the ecosystem. But it's like, I think Eric's advice is very, very smart, and just keep bootstrapping. It's one thing to go build relationships, and if we want to go get coffee, talk about your business, etc. That like I don't think that's a bad thing. I think you can get customers and grow. But yeah, it's like I think when you put yourself in a situation where you have to raise money, especially before you have institutional investors, real investors already backing you, you're in a pretty tight spot, and it's like a stench in the room when you come in to talk to investors. It's just like so tunnel vision on fundraising. So yeah, I just wanted to.
And I've seen it now from the other side, because the last 2 years I've personally invested about $2 million in startups, right? And so a few of them being one's called So Chinese Delivery here in Austin. This is a super cool concept, but it's a vertically integrated Chinese food delivery company, but they built their own delivery system, right? So they don't rely on Uber Eats, etc. Huge success, right? Just raised $8 million from Relevant Partners up in New York, which is kind of a leading VC firm in the hospitality tech space. But those guys came in with a very reasonable ask from a valuation perspective, right? And if someone comes in and is raising money and they overvalue their business, a lot of investors are not going to fight with you on valuation. They're just going to say, he's overvaluing his business, let's move on to the next opportunity, right? Another company I invested in was kind of during that 2020, 2019, 2020, like valued very high, but I just did it because it was kind of the thing to do, right? Like it.
Hey, I'm raising around. Do you want to?
Exactly. And then like the safe investments, right? And all the safes, and like, and going back to my stories, like out the gate when I raised 30 grand, I gave up 30% of my company. I valued my startup at $100,000. I had zero experience. I was 27 years old, zero experience. I raised 30,000, I gave up 30%. People looking back at it, it's like, oh my God, why did I give up so much? But you gotta get, it doesn't, a lot of nothing is a lot less than a little of a lot, right? So like, without giving up that 30%, I wouldn't have been in the position to then get going, right? Yeah. And getting that money early on from somebody, ideally, somebody that's gonna be a client, is the best, right? For me, I raised money early on from some guys that own large dental practices, because I knew that I needed the money, but I knew that they were gonna be a client, right? And early on, if you can just get your first few clients or your first kind of recurring revenue going, then you really can kind of start feeling good about that win, right? And for me, the win was $5,000 a month. I remember calling my dad and saying, "Oh my God, we just hit 5,000 this month. Like what?" It's like, okay, if we can ever get to 100,000, I'll just be the happiest guy in America, you know? And long story short, you know, 6 years later, you're doing $3 million a month. Just, it happens, but you've gotta put one foot in front of the other and not try to make it get big. It'll get big naturally if it's a good product, it's a good company, and you're doing it right. Just do what you need to do to get to that next step.
And I'm curious, Roei, your perspective on this too, because you guys you mentioned raised a pretty large round, but you guys are a fairly young company at the same time. Like, how did you guys start seeing that market fit so early on and kind of like hit the ground running and off to the races?
Yeah, so we bootstrapped our company for the first 9 months, but since we are doing financing, we did have a partner that allowed us to deploy capital, to deploy financing. And I remember, like, we signed our first client, and a week after the US went into a lockdown. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember, but that partner is a friend of mine, and he sent me a screenshot of, like, he took it with his phone of the S&P going like this, with a short comment beneath it, "Your clients," and and then, you know, turns out that COVID was not so bad for e-commerce and for the economy, and we really started to grow. We went into our to raise our seed round when we really had to. Okay, we didn't have any more options. We had to scale. We had to deploy more capital. We had to. So and when we went to ask for more capital, for a bigger facility, the partners was telling us we would love to, but first do an equity round. And that's how we grew and grew. We did the A round the same, and now the B round. And for us, and I guess few of us around the table are doing fintech, right? And with fintech is a bit different, because when you are deploying a facility, you need also to have equity that will parallel it, you know, in a certain way, and that's our way to grow. So that's why we did it.
To give you more credit, I mean, it's not just the S&P crashing that you guys did well, because you have competitors that are also doing financing e-commerce brands that today are out of business. I mean, there are companies, you can't say that, but like I will. I mean, you look at a company like ClearCo, where they'd raised so much equity, and I'm sure you got texts every time from your people that knew you when they raised. They'd say, "Hey, do you compete with ClearCo?" And you're going, "Fuck off, leave me alone, I'm building," right? And you're probably thinking long term we're going to win, but like there's these other companies that grow so fast, and you go, "There's no way it's sustainable. It's just a matter of time. I'm going to wait." And so ClearCo had the same, backing, wins that you did. You're still here. They're out of business because they put money into companies that are now sort of went bankrupt. And they just, I always say with fintech companies, it's so easy to give money away, but it's way more difficult to get it back with the spread and make money. So it's just a lot of credit for not just growing, but like measured growth, I think, over time.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
But,
you can just say you killed ClearCo somehow.
No, we didn't. We didn't. It's
not a killer over here.
It's like
business, basically. Yeah.
Again, we came to we had the advantage of coming later to the game, look at what happened in the space and try to do something differently. our edge is technology. Okay, so we are using a lot of tech to do what we do, and not just deploy funds, and hopefully it will keep being sustainable and grow in the same pace. But it's a daily challenge, and we have to work on it. Yeah.
I think there's a really important piece there that you guys are both touching on, which is maybe several years ago, is sort of grow at all costs. Fine, there's going to be more funding to back it up, and is it a good customer, is it a bad customer, doesn't matter, it's money in the door, and that's really all changed. Sustainability means finding really good customers that are the right customers for your business. That means one thing for you guys with fintech, but for any B2B business, SaaS business, you need to find good customers that aren't going to churn, because that's what you can build a healthy business around, and that's more critical than ever.
And you have to say it, raising money was a vanity metrics for the last decade. People, they like doing that, and they like saying it, and the big players in the market, they like I don't remember, but like in the peak years when an Insight, a Tiger would go into a business, they would ask in the press release to reveal the valuation, right? Which was not something common before that, before that, people will avoid, they try to raise as little as possible and to keep the valuation as to themselves. Now people, when in the top of the market, people will just 5, 10 billion, 20 billion dollar valuation, and now that when it's not the same valuation, I don't know if that was a good.
Well, hopefully it was a majority recap and you took a bunch off the table at that overpriced valuation. Not saying yours wasn't. I didn't mean to do that, but these Tiger deals, I have plenty of friends that did these deals, and I'm like, you know what, listen, I hate that you're bragging about valuation and raising, but you also took 70% of the round as secondary. So you know what, good for you. It's basically an exit. Not great for employee options, obviously, not great for angels, not great for early folks, but.
Yeah, I think it's important to know as you grow and you fundraise, ask yourself, put yourself in their shoes. Anyone that's going to invest in your business, they have to see what's the exit for them, what's the upside for them, and then there has to be a buyer on the other side. So there's always got to be that story on what's next, right? And looking back, if you've got a lot of things in your mind or on your roadmap that are what's next, sometimes you want to keep that close to your vest, right? And maybe not go all in on everything at the beginning and not succeed at it, because an investor might come and say, well, you tried that, didn't work. But if you focus on what you know is going to work at each stage, then for us, we were in dental, right? And over 15,000 dental practices utilize the Membersy platform, right? 1 million members utilize it in 40 states. When I went to raise our big round, I said, okay, well, here's what's next. We're going to go into dermatology, med spas, right? We're going to go into veterinarian, right? And we're going to create a patient financing mechanism within the platform that enables our members to finance their treatment through us versus going to like a care credit, right? So that makes sense, okay? Now, that investor understands that, buys on. Now, when they sell, or when we sell again, what's in it for the next person? We might not have that answer today, but those are things that we're working on, right?
So many founders get infatuated with the immediate negotiation. They forget the subsequent negotiations they need to win in order to win the game, right? And it's not about the price at which investors invest in, or when you get invested in. It's the price when you get the money out, right? And so essentially there's a lot of entrepreneurs, and even today, are coming trying to raise their first round at double-digit valuations, and they're actually doing themselves a disservice, and they're limiting their optionality, because if they raise today at that valuation, then their next round they've got to double the valuation to become attractive enough to attract the next class of investors, because you kind of only get one shot. And so I would highly encourage you lean on that, the path that Eric went down, and just hey, let's take a little bit of money but give up maybe a little more equity than every founder around you that's talking about it, but because the biggest risk risk is not capitalizing the business. And the other thing I'd say is like people only talk about the good valuations. And I guarantee you're all hearing like, oh, double digit this, 20 million cap that, but in reality, that's not really the deals that are getting done. And it's, if you're a SaaS business with nominal revenue, you should be looking at the $3 to $5 million valuation range, and you should consider that a gift. Last final word is the faster we can get there as an ecosystem, the faster we can get back to business. Because investors did everybody a disservice for a long time, giving people bad valuations that are super high, and we're not living in that world anymore. So as soon as we can kind of reconcile this discussion, I think is when we'll really start to see everything take off again.
Well, those investors too, at that time, they knew the climate. So for example, I didn't know this, but $100 million valuation with a 2x pref, right, is actually a lower valuation than a $60 million valuation with a 1x pref.
And the preference, if you don't know, means that those investors get their money back first before anybody else gets it back. So if they have a 2x pref, and they get twice their money back before anybody else gets paid.
And there's different versions of it, right? You've got your waterfall, which is
right.
In your operating agreement where it says, okay, if this happens, this gets paid, then it gets paid, this gets paid. So
right. Usually debt holders are kind of right on the top of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so and then everybody early on, they want to raise minority growth rounds, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because you want to have control of the business, right? Well, when someone's giving you a minority growth round investment, they're putting things in that investment that make it basically like a majority investment, meaning CapEx provisions, right? Board seat provisions, it's the same thing. Don't get caught up on minority growth round versus a majority buyout. They're the same, in my opinion, they're the same thing. Right, and
you get stuck looking at the economic provisions, you forget these control provisions.
Exactly.
And the control provisions ultimately dictate a lot of the outcome and are a lot hairier than the valuation.
What's Capital Factory's favorite control term to get in there?
We don't lead rounds, and so we don't end up negotiating these terms with investors, which allows us to align with founders more. So that's why it's important to all.
Smart guy over here.
That's the model. Yeah.
There is one golden rule: is to watch Silicon Valley, the sitcom. You will learn everything about it. If you watch this show,
it's a good show.
All the pref and the liquidation, and those are they articulate it very well over there.
I'd also just say VC money, there's a place for it. I raised VC too, but it truly is the best marketed money in the world. I've never seen something marketed as well as VC. You've got these massive sledgehammers like TechCrunch, the Wall Street Journal, the Fortune 100, the Forbes 1000 that just celebrate this stuff. But for every one you read about, there's 2,000 that are bootstrapped quietly in Kentucky, running a waste management business, making $5 million a year, profitable with $2 million going to the bottom line, and the founder's getting rich and doesn't even know what TechCrunch is. So we lose a lot of sight of that. I think the new American dream, especially with those no-code tools, is building a bootstrap software company to $3 or $4 million in revenue, where you own 100% and it's profitable, and you have full control and you can do whatever you want. It's an interesting path, and frankly it's the silent majority. It's more common.
Yeah. I do think that's the bottom line. Statistically speaking, right? You have so many founders out there trying to start something, looking to get to, what those types of outlets are promoting, right? These big valuations and all that stuff. When at the end of the day, I've have a mentor who had an exit of $1 billion, but owned less than a fraction of the company by the end of it, and 14 years in. And alternatively, sold his last business to Gusto for $30-40 million, and was the only signature required for that acquisition, and was able to do it in a month. I think that journey, that latter part of that journey, I think not enough founders take that into stake or into account. As you guys are operating your businesses now, given the current economic climate and conditions, how have you guys maybe even, evolved your way of thinking towards either valuation or even potential exit or whatever that might mean in terms of, outcome for your business?
I'm bad. We only look at profit per employee and revenue per employee, so we don't even think about valuation.
Yeah, we want to go forward in a way where we don't have to raise money again at all. So that would mean valuation is something we're only really worrying about as an exit scenario.
Yeah.
we've got a lot of work before we can get there, but we also have time after raising our last round. So
for me, it's, when I stepped down last April as CEO, I advise the new CEO and help him as needed, but I've got 2 of the 5 board seats in the business, right? And I represent the common shareholders' interests, right? And so I've now looked at it from a shareholder. I look at everything from a shareholder perspective versus an operator, and I say that because it's extremely different, right? As a shareholder perspective, it's more looking at how do I get return on my common shares, right? As an operator, I was almost blinded, right? It was like everything I was doing on a daily basis, I was so passionate about, I was emotional about it, right? Like things that I've done, I was really proud of, blah, 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 right? And I always kind of viewed the success. I didn't really look at financials early on when we were growing. I could feel how the company was doing each month. Like I could sit down with you on the 5th of the month and tell you, last month we had a record month, just because I could tell how people were acting in the office, right? And the vibe that it was. Now, I look at things as, we gotta have one of 2 things, right? You gotta either be a growth story or you gotta be an EBITDA story, right? If you don't have an EBITDA, because people will buy you and invest in you if you're not growing much, but you have a super lean business, you produce EBITDA because it's cash flow positive, they can make their money back in dividends, right? If it's a growth story, that's great, right? Because you're continuing to grow as long as you can show that path, right? But at some point you've got to realize, okay, we're either a growth story or an EBITDA story, or you can build what I just call like a strategic story, like building a product or a service that is very valuable to a strategic buyer that would maybe buy it, not necessarily because of the EBITDA or the growth, but because it will supplement their business nicely, right? Or add a missing piece into what they're doing nicely, right? So, in short, kind of when you're an operator, it's like you versus the investors, I want to say, in a way. I remember investors always call me, I need an update. I wouldn't return calls. I was just too busy. It was wasting my time. I didn't need to provide you an update whenever you needed to call. Right now on the other side, it's like, hey, I need an update. It's all perspective, right? And that story and my story is not anybody else's story other than my story, right? And so there's no playbook in my opinion, right? There's no, the playbook is just being curious.
I mean, right now though, there are good playbooks, like don't waste a good catastrophe. So right now, if you raise money at a high valuation a year ago, you should be negotiating with Carta when you do your new 409A, get with your board and make sure you negotiate a lower 409A valuation so that new team members, when you recruit them, they get more of the upside, because you all agree that you can argue with Carta that the market valuation is lower. We took our fair market per share value, I think, from 139 down to 117. It was a board decision where we said we feel like we can actually substantiate with Carta that fintech markets have taken a hit. The Fed's increased rates 6%. That's bad for companies like ours. We can actually negotiate for a lower valuation. Let's do it. It's great for new recruits.
I think you just have to send them an email. I mean, I've heard some stories.
Well, point being, most people don't even know right now to go try and negotiate a lower fair market value for upside. Is my point, right? So there are definite playbooks that you should be running right now in a constricted market where no one's writing checks and interest rates are high, to set yourself up as a founder better long term. Is my point. Buying out angel investors that put in money 4 years ago right now is also a great opportunity, right? I mean, a lot of them don't have dry powder. They'd love to take advantage of their pro rata on their hot deal in their portfolio, but they don't have any money right now. So if you offer maybe 1x, 1.5x something on the $300K check they wrote 2 years ago, they might take that deal.
We would be believing in
He thought about it.
I don't know.
he thought about it.
Are you saying you write me the check now, or?
Have you had any founders try and run this playbook on Capital Factory, like 2017 investments, 2018 investments?
Not that one specifically. I mean, there is a lot of, we're investing pretty much exclusively behind investors that are putting in 10 times as much money as us, taking the board seat, doing all the things that limit your optionality. And so it's a blessing and a curse to ride that wave. But basically there's all these big funds on the boards trying to figure out WTF they're gonna do. And there's just a lot of creativity, and whether it be, pay to play rounds, right? And there's situations where, these funds have to, the companies need money. They, in a lot of cases, maybe shouldn't need money and had the opportunity to get to a spot where they don't, but they do. And the fund, and let's just say they got 100 angel investors in the deal. I've seen this. And then there's 3 big funds, like a Tiger type deal. And they're basically saying, hey, like, we're going to do this pay to play round and we're going to put some money in. But anybody that doesn't put money in at their pro rata, which is going to be 10 times more than what they invested originally. So if you put in 50K, you got to put in 300K just to maintain your ownership position and not get diluted, 10 to 1, right? And so like all these big funds are coming in and getting aggressive, and it's not good for the early shareholders. And in that case, actually, like the common shares are like more protected because the founders are still in it, the employees are still in it, and we get some common shares too. But so yeah, that's more of what we're seeing is there's just people are having to right size themselves, and it's like we've all been walking the plank for 12, 18 months now, and there's only so much runway left that it's like you're kind of pushing it right at the end. And so yeah, and like ultimately what that creates is a lot of interesting new investment opportunities for us, where it's kind of similar to your employees. These companies are getting recapped, they've got twice as much traction, twice as much product that they did 12 months ago, but the valuation is half as much. And we're like, oh God, we invested 12 months ago, we're definitely gonna invest now. Like, so yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing.
Cool. We'll wrap things up here because I just want to be able to have some time, capping up on the hour for the audience to ask any questions. But before we do, we'd love to get everybody's kind of like 2 cents for last minute thoughts, advice on any other founders out there that, might be early in the game still and like in this market and kind of like backed up against the wall. And, again, maybe going back to some of the earlier days of where some of you guys have been operating, maybe currently where you are at, and just sharing, any thoughts or convictions around things that they should be thinking about, maybe a little bit outside the box of the typical advice. Let me start over here.
Yeah, I think it's a great time to start a business for a couple of reasons. It's tough. It's actually tougher than it's ever been. So if you fuck up and it doesn't work out, you're going to learn a lot faster. And if you survive in this tough market, you're going to be in a position of incredible strength. So, I think when people are just passing out checks, that can actually make starting a business harder. There's more competitors. It's harder to find the signal through the noise. But it's hard. It's probably harder now, but better. It's a really good time in that perspective.
I'm not sure how much it's helpful, but I just spoke with my team today in the morning, and I told them I think I'm close to 6 years in the fintech game now, and I'm still learning about the different layers of money, how it's structured and how the stack is built, and if you're a founder and part of your job is to raise money and to deal with funding and financing and equity and all those stuff, you really have to understand how deep is this stack and what is the different motivations of each player in the stack, right? The pension fund has one motivation, the insurance company another one, the VC, the angel, the corporate VC, the banks, the credit funds, whoever out there, the secure, the non-secure, all those professional jargon that we spoke around at this table. If you are a founder, I guess 95% of first, second, third time founders, they don't know about it. They don't really understand because it's complicated. Wall Street is a huge industry with lots of layers, and the better you will understand it, the more knowledgeable you will be how to take advantage of it, or how to use it to your benefit and to get to your next goal, right? So that's my advice.
Yeah, that's really good.
I think my advice is kind of twofold, right? So the first main is in operating your business, right, and starting your business. My advice there is, who cares if it doesn't work out, right? Look at it through the lens of what's important in your life, right? If it doesn't work out, you're not going to die. No one you love is gonna die, right? If it doesn't work out, you might have to get another job, right? Or you might have to ask a friend or family member for a loan before you get that next job, but just go all in. I mean, if it doesn't work out, you can still be happy with the fact that you did what very little people out there do, which is actually took a step off that cliff and became an entrepreneur and a founder. And on the other side, if it doesn't work out, there are a lot of awesome companies that are looking for people that have taken that founder risk, right? So you're building your resume, you're building your career, even if it doesn't work out. And then on kind of the operating of the business, no one knows your company like you know it, right? So take as much advice as you can, talk to as many former founders, or read as much as you can. But at the end of the day, make a decision that you know is right. You know best. Even when VCs and investors get involved, like I would have investors that they were super successful guys, started multi-billion-dollar companies, and but they were in different industries and different times, and had different levels of success and whatnot. And mine was mine was always different, right? But I would take what they would say and I try to apply it to what we're doing. And then on the raising money side, I would recommend early, like if you're really going down the path of raising money, and it's hard early, but get a banker. Get a really good banker that, not as a transactional banker, but a investment banker that works with you ideally for years and years, right? Because if your banker knows you and knows your business very well, they can communicate all the things about your business and you to potential investors. And good bankers have great relationships, to where if you get one offer, you're gonna have 10, right? So get a good banker as early as you can. And if you can't get one to come on board, because they do work on commission, right? They make a percentage of the deal, so it's tough to get some really good ones early on. But if you don't have one early on, try to get a good attorney early on that can help you out, because those will be vital for you. Because like you said, it's complicated. You'll never really figure it out, and it's a full-time gig raising money. So the more you're raising money, the less you're running your business, right? Ideally, you're running your business, and when you're raising money, you're coming in, you're coming out, you're doing it effectively. So that would be my advice.
Yeah.
Mine would be super fast. If you guys visit on your phones the website saasopen.com, you would have no idea that it is owned and operated by Founderpath. It's a negative CAC distribution channel for us. We did $500,000 of ticket sales there last year. It cost us $200K to put on, so it was a profitable channel for us. We had 1,000 SaaS founders attend, and we deployed $10 million of new capital there, which will make about $3 million from over time. Right now, if you can't, or you're having problems building a SaaS company, focus on building audience. And if you already have a SaaS company, focus on building owned and operated distribution channels so you can get to negative CAC. That will give you immense optionality long term.
I love that. I love those proprietary channels, and there's some super cool stuff you can do with that. So great advice. It's been a great conversation around here all the time. This is, I'll say it a slightly different way, but it's kind of like know what you don't know, but like know what you're delusional about. Right? It's like every founder, and this is a pro and a con, but like every founder is delusional about something. There may be a little bit of an exception, but it's like, what are you really pushing the boundaries on? And it might be valuation, right? And if you're gonna go in and demand a $20 million valuation when you're pre-revenue, at least know that that's freaking like crazy. And who knows, maybe you'll get an investor to take it, and congratulations, you got a good deal, and like I don't want to invest in that investor's fund, but but yeah, it really is easy to get caught up in your own dog food with these things, and I think the previous market, you got away with it a lot more, but I think some reality checks are in favor. So I just really ask yourself, think sober thoughts on what's real, what's not, and then project your embellishments intentionally.
Fair enough. We have time maybe for one or two questions if anybody has some. If not, we can conclude this as our first Founders Roundtable in Austin. Yeah?
So hi, so I would want to know more on how you guys convert sales. I know that's a question, that's not a big answer.
How do we convert sales?
But to be very precise, B2B sales are very tough. It's different than B2C. B2B sales, because every client, or no matter how
Yep.
You might have to tweak the product in some form or the other. So the question that I have is basically, firstly, how do you reach to the client? Okay, and if the client tells you I have already that solution, what is the next thing that you do and to track it?
You just tell them their competitor's about to buy, and once you sell to the competitor, you're not going to sell to them, and they'll return your phone calls and emails. Just kidding.
For me early
That's what I would do.
For me early on, getting prospects to convert, right, was always an emotional thing. Meaning, I would try to go after prospects that I knew had a founder as the CEO, and I would literally tell them straight up, look, we're early in our career, but I'll tell you, we're working our butt off, and we might not have everything that you need in a product, and this company that you're also looking at might be older and bigger and blah, 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 but I'll tell you this, as a founder, we will do everything we can to make sure that we will take the best care of you and do what you need. So let's sign this agreement, let's start working together. Right? We can check 7 of the 10 boxes you need on day one but the other 3 boxes, you've got my word that we are going to work on creating those, in due time. So you do that. I learned that when you talk to a founder, they see that of these bigger companies, they see themselves in you, right? And they want to help you. So try to, if you've got 10 prospects you really like, try to just figure out who the ones are ran by maybe 2 of them, right? And really connect with them that way of like, hey, look, we don't have it figured out. We might not be the best, right? But I promise you, we will be the best for you because of these reasons. So it's more of connecting with that person on a founder kind of mindset.
And to her point, I think you brought up a point where you said you didn't understand tech and you had to figure it out. It's the reverse for me. I'm a tech person trying to build GTM and doing that. Oh my God, it's just as hard trying to figure out what's the motion you need to do at different stages of the company. I think that's what I'm struggling with. And there's this huge conversation about should you do SDRs or not? SDRs dying, all this stuff coming up. So I'm trying to deal with that.
What's your answer, Justin?
SDR.
I want to know.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah. I've built. Yeah.
Your points of view on
SDRs aren't dying, but SDRs that aren't curious, that aren't almost feeling like they're the founder of the business, to be able to understand how they can provide unique value to that brand. That's dead, right? I mean, you can just automate all of that. So what you have to do is create a process that can consistently deliver value to the person that you're reaching out to. And there's some playbooks that you can do, like referencing that brand's competitors that you work with, or maybe you're about to work with, to pique interest and create credibility. But most importantly, if you're trying to do a feature parity bake-off, you're gonna lose. Not gonna work. You need to reach out with enough value because you were curious about their business, about here's what I'm gonna do specifically that I'm not talking about XYZ business, this is unique to you and how I'm gonna help you. And as long as someone reads that email, which is gonna happen 1% of the time. So now we gotta be curious, drive value, and do it at scale, but that's how you break in. And at early stage, you just have to do it. You have to do it all day.
This reminds me about Trendkite got started. It's a cool thing.
Trendkite
Trendkite was a company I met
Trendkite,
him at. It was a
yeah, yeah.
successful company.
Of course,
and they had I don't know exactly how it worked, but they created some PR ranking of all the brands on the internet and said, hey, here's where you stand on the ranking we created. You want to be hired, buy our software.
Yeah.
And,
And by the way, that ranking was based on nothing.
Right.
It's just, you want to create value and interest and pain.
Right. Yeah.
Attention.
Yeah, and I would say get out too. So if you're talking to somebody and you've had a call with them, you've been back and forth on a few emails, and get out and go fly them, because that gesture, not a lot of people are doing that anymore, right? Get out there and fly them, go see them. And I have an old saying, find their vice and hit that twice. Right, so if they like beer, take them to go get beer twice. If they like golfing, take them that twice. If they like going to basketball games, do that. Whatever it may be, it's kind of a cheesy saying, but
That's good.
Getting out is something that's super underrated. And then I would also do something very old school. I'd write handwritten letters
I hear about that.
all the time. I'd write handwritten letters and just send that to them overnight, right to their assistant, whatever. It's just doing something that's different than what other people are doing.
Trust me, I found huge respect for sales enablement. I truly respect that amount of time it takes. I did hire SDRs as you were wrong,
Yeah.
but the amount of time
Yeah.
it takes looking at their emails and responses.
And then as you grow, you'll start to get, like I remember this, like when we were growing and I was CEO of Membersy, I'd get 10, 15 sales people a day reaching out to me, and I would kind of like, okay, I do this, right? And so what I would do is like, anybody that sends me a little quick LinkedIn message, no. I don't even reply to it, right? Anyone that would just send me a cold email, no. If someone would call me on my cell phone, introduce themselves real quick and say, hey, I know you're busy, my name's so-and-so, we do this. I would love to chat with you. I'd always do that because people don't call you up on your cell phones anymore.
You pick up your cell phone when someone calls, you pick up.
I think if someone leaves me a voicemail,
I think I have like 3,000 voicemail messages. 700 are for my mom, 200 dad. You still pick up and will answer a phone.
Salespeople, like you can call back.
If you're trying to sell me, you will never get through to my phone. I'll put it that way.
I guess I'm a little old school.
Yeah, you need to find the right audience and the right channels.
You gotta
Yeah.
try everything.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to like something we touched upon earlier. Like, I can send you like I do go-to-market and growth for a lot of early-stage companies, and probably now work with 300 plus like venture-backed startups and SaaS. So I think like there's definitely a playbook of like channels, audience, and messaging that you have to optimize against. But I would say the very key of it all is like you have to be operating like your back's against the wall before you hire SDR. You need to figure out what the process looks like. You need to understand what they should be doing and give them some material. Otherwise, they're just shooting blanks in the dark.
And they'll leave pretty quickly after you hire them.
Yeah, and then you'll see that retention issue be really, really bad. All right. I mean, on that note, we've hit over time, so I would just want to say thank you everybody for joining us today and participating in this. It was, I think, it was very enlightening and very helpful. Hopefully, to everybody else that was listening in here, but also to the future audiences that are going to be tuning into this. So, thank you guys.
Yep. Thank you.